He was their emotional bedrock, the one who responded instantly, remembered every detail and showed up without fail. At 2 a.m. or 2 p.m., he remained steadfast, listening, supporting, giving endlessly. He memorized their stories, celebrated their birthdays and comforted them through every breakdown. He answered calls on the first ring, cancelled his own plans and stayed awake through their darkest hours. He made them feel like the center of the universe. And then, gradually, he became invisible to them. Not physically, not dramatically, but slowly, imperceptibly. They stopped asking about his life. His messages sat unread. They drifted away, not from anger or conflict, but from simple indifference. His warmth hadn't pushed them away. His consistency hadn't frightened them. It was his constant availability, his perpetual presence that rendered him forgettable. According to Carl Jung, this phenomenon wasn't mere emotional rejection. It represented a profound collapse of psychic energy, an erasure of individuality. When your energy flows outward without restraint, when you never withdraw, pause, or protect your inner world, you begin to vanish, not because you're insufficient, but because you're excessive. Too present, too accessible, too reliable, and to the human psychic apparatus, what remains perpetually available eventually ceases to exist. In this video, we'll explore one of Jung's most profound and unsettling insights: why excessive emotional availability destroys attraction, how overgiving depletes your psychic identity, and why mastering the art of strategic withdrawal might be the ultimate form of self-respect you'll ever develop. We inhabit a culture that celebrates constant connection, always online, always reachable, perpetually one message away from anyone, anywhere. Yet beneath this hyper-connected facade lies a counterintuitive truth. The more emotionally available you are, the less you're valued. The friend who never declines an invitation, the partner who always initiates contact, the employee who answers emails at midnight. They aren't rewarded for their dedication, they're taken for granted. Modern relationships, romantic, platonic, even professional, have evolved into psychological paradoxes. We claim to desire loyalty, consistency, and presence, yet subconsciously we pursue distance. We're magnetically drawn to mystery. We instinctively crave what withdraws and withhold our deepest investment from what remains constant. This is the paradox of excessive availability in a world that prizes scarcity. You offer everything: time, attention, empathy, support, believing it will strengthen your connections. Instead, something unsettling occurs. You become invisible, fading into the background of others' lives. Why? Jung attributed this to psychic energy, the vital force powering our thoughts, emotions, and presence. When constantly directed outward into conversations, conflicts, and comfort-giving, it doesn't merely exhaust your spirit, it fundamentally erodes your sense of self. This erosion isn't obvious or dramatic. It manifests subtly as chronic fatigue, excessive rumination, profound loneliness despite constant company. You sense you're doing everything right while gradually becoming irrelevant to those you value most. Jung proposed the solution wasn't bitter withdrawal, but individuation, reclaiming your psychic energy, integrating your inner world, becoming whole and autonomous, not through external availability, but through internal rootedness. Because in a world addicted to more, the most magnetic presence is precisely the one that knows when to disappear. Carl Jung didn't view the mind as merely logical machinery processing information. He saw it as a living ecosystem, powered by a mysterious invisible force he called psychic energy. This wasn't physical electricity or biochemical adrenaline. It was something far more profound and intimate. Your psychic energy represents the raw fuel of your attention, emotion, imagination, and vitality. It animates your existence. It enables you to feel deeply, think clearly, create meaning, and forge genuine connections. But here's the critical insight. You possess a finite reservoir. Like currency in an account, battery power in a device, or oxygen in a confined space, your psychic energy depletes, especially when squandered without discretion. Every time you compromise your boundaries with a reluctant yes, every time you anxiously check your phone seeking validation, every time you overanalyze a text message, a facial expression, or a moment of silence, you're depleting your essential energy. And if you never replenish that energy, if you remain perpetually available, giving, and responsive, you inevitably approach emotional bankruptcy. Jung observed that psychic energy flows in two primary directions: outward into the external world of people, activities, and distractions, and inward toward the self-reflection and authentic growth. Unfortunately, contemporary life seems meticulously designed to trap you in the outward flow. Endless notifications, social media algorithms, and technological connectivity constantly demand your attention. People-pleasing tendencies, codependent patterns, and rejection anxiety continuously drain your emotional reserves. Even maintaining constant pleasantness when it doesn't reflect your authentic feelings represents a significant energetic leak. The result? You surrender your most valuable inner resource to people who haven't earned access, to digital platforms indifferent to your well-being, to habitual patterns that leave you fundamentally depleted. Imagine your psychic energy as a sacred flame. Feed it mindlessly to every demand and it flickers out. Protect it with intention and it illuminates everything you genuinely choose to touch. This explains why certain individuals transform the atmosphere upon entering a room. They carry concentrated, focused energy. They haven't scattered their essence in desperate attempts to be universally liked. They've channeled their vitality inward, allowing it to radiate outward naturally and powerfully. The tragedy? Most people remain unaware they're leaking their vital force. The perpetually available friend becomes everyone's emotional dumping ground. The ever-messaging lover fades into background noise. The employee incapable of refusing requests becomes the office doormat. They aren't perceived as strong, compelling presences. They're categorized as safe, predictable, ultimately forgettable. Psychic energy, when offered freely and endlessly, doesn't inspire profound connection. It invites apathy. Jung warned that when you surrender control over your energetic flow, you relinquish control over your identity and impact. To reclaim your presence, power, and self-respect, you must learn to protect your energy as vigilantly as you would guard your physical well-being. Because in the deepest sense, they are indistinguishable. Even when untrue, this perception destroys magnetism. It creates a profound paradox. The more effort you visibly invest, the less others value your presence. Yet paradoxically, the less you appear to try, the more people crave your attention. This dynamic transcends romantic relationships. It's universal. The misunderstood artist posthumously becomes legendary. The highly selective position feels inherently prestigious. The perpetually busy friend seems inexplicably important. How should we respond to this psychological reality? Not by manipulating others or playing emotional games, rather by ceasing to hemorrhage our vital energy toward those who haven't demonstrated. They deserve such investment because authentic love never requires self-erasure. Genuine respect never demands desperate pleading. Jung cautioned against excessively surrendering ourselves to others, warning that in doing so, we sacrifice the essential element that fosters deep connection, our inherent mystery. We venerate kindness as universally virtuous, selfless, noble, almost divine. But what if certain expressions of kindness stem not from authentic love, but from unacknowledged fear? What if perpetual availability, endless agreeability, and relentless self-sacrifice represent not generosity, but systematic self-annihilation? Jung identified this as our shadow, those darker aspects of ourselves we conceal, suppress, or deny because we perceive them as unacceptable. The righteous anger we pretend doesn't exist. The legitimate needs we silence to appear accommodating. The essential boundaries we never establish because rejection terrifies us. For many, kindness functions as an elaborate mask, a strategy to ensure acceptance or prevent abandonment. Consider your own history. Where did you internalize the belief that helpfulness guaranteed safety? Who implicitly taught you that expressing personal needs would drive others away? These patterns typically have deep origins. Childhood experiences, unpredictable caregivers, subtle emotional neglect. Somewhere, you absorbed a devastating lesson. If I remain unfailingly good, they won't leave me. Thus began your pattern. You evolved into the problem solver, the intuitive empath, the one who never voices complaints. Yet beneath your perpetual smile, your authentic self began dissolving. Because people-pleasing isn't peacekeeping, it's an invisible war against your own essence. Here lies the psychological nuance most overlooked. Kindness can become a form of control. When you give ceaselessly, you unconsciously hope to make yourself indispensable, appreciated, truly seen. It's an emotional transaction disguised as virtue. If I remain consistently available, perhaps they'll recognize my worth. If I love with sufficient intensity, perhaps they'll reciprocate equally. But affection that requires earning through excessive giving isn't love. It's psychological survival. This represents the shadow aspect of kindness Jung identified. When the compulsion to be perceived as good becomes overwhelming, you systematically bury your truth. You acquiesce when you long to refuse. You smile through exhaustion. You comfort others while privately fracturing. And gradually, imperceptibly, you vanish, becoming mere background in others' narratives. Present, useful, invisible. Yet here's the essential truth. Kindness without boundaries isn't compassion, it's psychological collapse. Authentic kindness honors both recipient and giver alike. It transcends the desperate need for approval, embracing genuine authenticity instead. Jung believed wholeness requires confronting our shadow, acknowledging the disowned aspects of ourselves and reintegrating them. Not to cultivate cruelty or abandon compassion, but to halt our self-erasure. Because truly magnetic individuals aren't those who give indiscriminately. They're those who give from authentic presence rather than existential fear. Eventually comes a moment, quiet yet devastating, when you realize you've constructed your entire identity around being needed rather than known. You remained perpetually present, giving and accommodating. Nevertheless, people drifted away, not because you lacked value, but because you never valued yourself. Jung believed the path to psychological wholeness, what he termed individuation, wasn't about transforming into someone else. It meant becoming fully yourself, not the version that performs, not the version that placates, but the version that exists authentically, even in solitude. Individuation involves integrating everything we've rejected about ourselves. The anger we feared was excessive, the desires we labeled selfish, the boundaries we were told were inappropriate. It's not pursuing perfection, it's pursuing authenticity. When you're exclusively kind, available, and agreeable, you aren't whole. You're fragmentary, a mere shadow of your potential self. Jung taught that genuine power emerges when we reclaim what we've disowned. That means expressing what previously seemed unspeakable. I cannot accommodate this. I require solitude. This situation violates my boundaries. Yes, this risks discomfort, perhaps even rejection, but it yields something invaluable: visibility. When you establish boundaries, others truly see you. When you decline instead of automatically acquiescing, people recognize your presence. You become defined, substantial. In a world constantly pulling at your attention, being anchored in your truth creates magnetic attraction. Consider those you genuinely admire, individuals whose mere presence transforms an environment. They aren't necessarily extroverted or perpetually accessible. They're simply rooted in authenticity. That's the paradox. Selective refusal makes your acceptance more meaningful. Occasional absence makes your presence unforgettable. This embodies Jung's concept of conserving psychic energy, recognizing that your emotional, intellectual, and spiritual resources aren't infinite but precious currency. When invested judiciously, their value increases, not just in others' estimation, but in your own self-perception. Practical individuation manifests as choosing restfulness over chronic overcommitment, speaking truth despite internal trembling, allowing others to experience disappointment without rushing to alleviate it, creating deliberate silence and observing what naturally emerges within it. It means abandoning the exhausting performance of perfection and embracing the raw, electrifying experience of authenticity. And here's the unexpected reward. When you cease striving for universal approval, you begin attracting those who appreciate your genuine essence. Because powerful presence, the kind that lingers after your departure, doesn't come from omnipresence. It emerges from self-knowledge, protecting your internal resources, and engaging from authentic intention rather than reflexive obligation. In our hyper-connected culture, those who master strategic absence become truly memorable. They don't respond instantaneously. They don't acquiesce merely to maintain harmony. They periodically withdraw, not as manipulation but for essential replenishment, for realignment. To return with genuine offerings rather than desperate validation seeking, Jung didn't teach techniques for popularity. He taught pathways to wholeness. And when you achieve wholeness, you cease pursuing external validation because your authentic presence communicates itself effortlessly. Rise, fall, rebirth, an embodied reliability. When friends needed transportation, she appeared instantly. When her boyfriend experienced difficulty, she abandoned her plans. When her supervisor requested overtime, she agreed without hesitation. She wasn't merely helpful, she was dependable, to the point of invisibility. Initially, people lavished praise. You're extraordinarily compassionate. You're unfailingly supportive. You're unlike anyone else. She treasured these affirmations like precious medals, finding temporary visibility through them, special. Yet, imperceptibly, something transformed. Her messages began lingering unanswered. Social engagements dissolved. Her name vanished from group conversations, event invitations, and ultimately from others' consciousness. She remained bewildered. She hadn't altered her behavior. She continued showing up, giving endlessly, sacrificing willingly. Nevertheless, they ceased acknowledging her presence. This invisibility wasn't dramatic. It was methodical, precise, unspoken. One evening, after waiting 2 hours for a friend who never materialized, Lena shattered, not with explosive emotion, but with a profound numbness that enveloped her like winter frost. Gazing at her reflection, she whispered a question that would alter her trajectory. Why do I only exist when I'm useful? This inquiry led her toward unexpected territory. Literature, therapeutic intervention, journals overflowing with previously unacknowledged rage and long-suppressed aspirations. Eventually, she discovered Carl Jung's work. Reading about psychic energy felt like encountering her own psychological diagnosis. Her emotional reserves had been systematically depleted through years of excessive giving. She studied Jung's concept of the shadow, those aspects of herself she had concealed to maintain approval, her righteous anger, her legitimate needs, her authentic voice. For the first time, Lena recognized a profound truth. She wasn't fundamentally kind. She was fundamentally frightened, terrified of becoming irrelevant. She had overcompensated through constant presence, attention, and accessibility. Jung offered an alternative pathway, individuation, not transforming into someone superior, but evolving into someone complete. The process began subtly. She stopped responding instantaneously. She declined requests without elaborate justifications. She bypassed social gatherings to commune with her own thoughts. Initially, this shift terrified her. People noticed the change. Some withdrew. Then something remarkable occurred. Others drew nearer, motivated not by convenience, but by genuine curiosity. Are you all right? You seem different. Something about your presence feels more substantial. She hadn't become more extroverted. She had become more grounded. Rather than dispersing energy into every interaction, she began attending to her inner voice. Her authentic desires, her legitimate requirements, her non-negotiable boundaries. She became less accessible and, paradoxically, more magnetically compelling. The same individuals who had previously overlooked her began gravitating toward her presence, not because she had altered her appearance, her expressions, or her habits, but because she no longer surrendered herself indiscriminately. She comprehended a fundamental truth. Affection without boundaries isn't authentic love. It's psychological performance, fear disguised as benevolence, and attention garnered through self-erasure isn't attention worth preserving. Lena didn't develop coldness. She cultivated discernment. She continued giving, but with conscious intention. She continued loving, but from internal abundance rather than depletion. Her once predictable presence transformed into something potent, because now when she appeared, people genuinely felt her arrival. She had reclaimed her essential energy, her personal boundaries, her authentic self. Lena hadn't vanished. She had finally, genuinely manifested. There exists a peculiar contradiction frequently overlooked in our desperate pursuit of connection. The more universally available we remain, the less distinctly visible we become. Cultural messaging insists that perpetual presence for everyone represents the hallmark of virtue. Yet paradoxically, constant accessibility transforms presence into ambient background, unnoticed and undervalued. It isn't your kindness being disregarded, it's your energy being unconsciously exploited. Jung recognized this psychological dynamic long before contemporary terminology like burnout or emotional labor entered our lexicon. He understood that each individual possesses a finite reservoir of psychic energy. Our emotional vitality, our attentional capacity, our spiritual presence. When you release that energy without discrimination or limitation, you don't merely exhaust yourself. You fundamentally dissolve your distinct identity. Consider the most magnetically compelling individuals you've encountered. They weren't perpetually messaging or instantly responsive. They didn't automatically accommodate every request. They possessed gravitational presence not through excessive effort, but through vigilant protection of their inner sanctuary. They practiced something increasingly rare in contemporary culture: strategic absence. They weren't omnipresent, consequently when they appeared, their presence carried genuine significance. Jung termed this process individuation, the evolution towards psychological wholeness. Not existing for external validation, but living from authentic self-knowledge, integrity, and internal fortitude. Reflect honestly. Where are you hemorrhaging precious energy? Whom are you attempting to rescue, repair, or impress by abandoning your own essence? The truth remains. Genuine visibility isn't achieved through hyperactivity. It's realized through authentic presence. It's allowing your affirmation to carry genuine weight by maintaining the courage to decline. It's prioritizing quality of presence over performance of availability, intention over reactivity. Safeguard your energetic reserves, not from self-centered motivation, but from profound self-respect. Because those who truly perceive your essence won't require your self-erasure to feel valued. They will recognize you when you finally appear authentically, not as a perpetual helper, but as your complete, unapologetic self. If you've experienced dismissal despite excessive generosity, understand this: it wasn't a failure of affection, it was a misalignment of energetic investment. The world doesn't invariably reward mere presence. It responds to focused power, and psychic energy represents power in its purest form. The more indiscriminately you surrender it, the more invisible you become. But now, you understand the pathway toward reclamation. If this message resonates within you, support its visibility by liking this video and sharing your experience in the comments. Have you felt depleted by perpetual availability? Your narrative might provide crucial reflection for someone else's journey. And if you're pursuing deeper self-understanding, if you're transitioning from self-erasure toward authentic visibility, then subscribe to this channel. Because here, we transcend superficial psychology. We explore those dimensions of your being that cultural conditioning taught you to disregard.